The massive crystalline doors of the Galactic Council headquarters stretched 40 meters high, their surface rippling with energy patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Ambassador David Kane stood before them, his hands steady despite knowing that beyond these doors waited the most powerful governing body in the known universe. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on his shoulders like a physical force. The doors dissolved into particles of light, revealing a chamber so vast it seemed to have its own weather patterns. Clouds of luminescent gas drifted between floating platforms where alien representatives sat in judgment. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, while the floor below was a transparent sheet suspended over a swirling galaxy hologram. 2 million species called this galaxy home, and their representatives filled every visible surface of the enormous space. Kane walked forward on the narrow bridge that led to the center platform, his footsteps echoing in the artificial atmosphere. On either side, beings that defied imagination observed his approach. Creatures of living crystal that communicated through harmonic frequencies, gas-based intelligences contained in pressure suits that glowed with internal lightning. Hive minds that spoke as one through thousands of small bodies moving in perfect coordination. At the center of the chamber, Supreme Arbiter Melos rose from his throne, his 12-meter-tall frame casting shadows across the platform. His species had ruled the galactic core for 50,000 years, and his voice carried the authority of eons when he spoke. Human representative, Melos began. His words translated into Kane's mind through neural interfaces. Your species stands accused of the greatest violation in galactic law. You have destroyed the research station at Proxima 7, killing 300 peaceful scientists from the Helix Confederation. The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. Around the chamber, alien voices rose in a symphony of condemnation. Humanity had been on trial for membership in the Galactic Council for 3 years, and now they faced expulsion from civilized space entirely. Kane looked up at the Supreme Arbiter without flinching. Your Honor, before this tribunal passes judgment, I request permission to present evidence that was not available during the preliminary hearings. A ripple of surprise passed through the assembly. Most species begged for mercy when facing such charges. Humans were apparently going to argue. Speak quickly, Melos commanded. The evidence against your species is overwhelming. Kane touched a device on his wrist and the air around him shimmered with holographic displays. The first image showed the Proxima 7 station, but not as the Council had seen it before. This view revealed hidden weapon arrays built into what had appeared to be scientific equipment. The station at Proxima 7 was not conducting peaceful research, Kane announced, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. It was a military installation designed to test biological weapons specifically engineered to target human physiology. The chamber erupted in protests from the Helix Confederation delegates, but Kane continued speaking over the noise. The holographic display shifted to show intercepted communications between station personnel, their words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. We have been studying human genetic markers for 2 years. The recorded voice of the station commander played for all to hear. The weapon is 97% effective against their specific DNA structure. One deployment will eliminate their entire species while leaving other life forms unharmed. The protests from the Helix delegation turned to shocked silence. Kane let the implications sink in before continuing his presentation. For the past 3 years, while humanity has been seeking membership in this council, the Helix Confederation has been developing a genocide weapon. The destruction of Proxima 7 was not an act of aggression. It was an act of survival. Supreme Arbiter Melos leaned forward on his throne, his ancient eyes focusing on the human ambassador. These communications could be fabricated. What proof do you offer of their authenticity? Kane smiled, an expression that translated poorly across most species, but somehow conveyed perfect confidence. Your Honor, we offer the testimony of someone who was present when these recordings were made. He gestured toward the viewing gallery, and a section of the chamber's wall became transparent, revealing an observation deck where another figure stood waiting. The being that entered the main chamber was clearly Helix Confederation, its flowing tentacles and bioluminescent patches identifying it as a high-ranking member of their scientific caste. I am Research Director Valen of the Helix Confederation, the being announced, its mental voice reaching every consciousness in the chamber. I was the primary developer of the weapon system at Proxima 7. Everything the human ambassador has stated is true. The chamber fell into absolute silence. In 50,000 years of galactic law, no member of an accused species had ever provided testimony against their own government during a council hearing. Valen continued speaking, its bioluminescent patches pulsing with emotional intensity. My government ordered the creation of a weapon designed to eliminate humanity entirely. When I refused to participate further, they attempted to have me eliminated. The humans rescued me during their attack on the station. Kane stepped forward, addressing the Supreme Arbiter directly. Your Honor, this case represents something far more serious than the destruction of a single station. It reveals that members of this council are willing to commit genocide against species seeking membership. How many other developing civilizations have faced similar threats? The question struck the assembly like a physical blow. Around the chamber, representatives began examining their neighbors with new suspicion. The Galactic Council prided itself on maintaining peace through law and diplomacy. But if one member could secretly develop genocide weapons, how many others harbored similar intentions? Melos raised his hand for silence, and the chamber immediately quieted. The testimony presented here is disturbing. However, the human response was extreme. The destruction of Proxima 7 killed beings who may have been innocent of wrongdoing. Kane nodded gravely. Your Honor, we accept responsibility for those deaths. However, we would like the Council to consider the alternative. If we had not acted, within 6 months there would have been no humans left to stand trial. He activated another holographic display, this one showing deployment schedules and target locations throughout human space. The Helix Confederation had planned to simultaneously release their biological weapon on 12 human worlds, ensuring complete species extinction within days. The question before this council, Kane continued, is not whether humanity acted violently. The question is whether a species has the right to defend itself against planned genocide, even when that defense requires preemptive action. Around the chamber, representatives began consulting with their advisors in rapid, agitated conferences. The legal precedent being established here would affect every species in the galaxy. If the Council ruled that preemptive self-defense was illegal, it would essentially legalize secret genocide attempts as long as they remained hidden until activation. Supreme Arbiter Melos stood, his massive frame commanding absolute attention. This hearing will recess for deliberation. The Council will reconvene in 24 standard hours to render judgment. As the chamber began to empty, Kane remained on the central platform, watching the alien representatives file out through various exits. Many of them stared at him as they passed, their expressions unreadable but their body language suggesting a mixture of fear and respect. Research Director Valen approached the platform, its tentacles moving in patterns that conveyed gratitude. Ambassador Kane, my government will likely try to have me executed for treason. Was protecting your species worth becoming an exile from my own? Kane looked at the being that had risked everything to reveal the truth. Director, if the Council rules in our favor tomorrow, you won't be an exile. You'll be a hero who helped establish the principle that genocide is never acceptable, even when conducted in secret. As they left the chamber together, neither of them noticed the small recording devices that had been carefully placed throughout the facility by parties unknown. The proceedings they had just witnessed would soon be broadcast across the galaxy, reaching species that had never heard of humans or the Helix Confederation. The trial that was supposed to determine humanity's fate had instead revealed something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Tomorrow's ruling would either establish humanity as a protected species under galactic law, or mark them for elimination by powers that preferred to work in darkness. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency session began exactly 24 hours later, but the chamber had changed dramatically overnight. Where 2 million species representatives had sat in orderly delegations, now there were empty sections scattered throughout the vast space. Entire civilizations had recalled their ambassadors rather than face the implications of the evidence presented against the Helix Confederation. Supreme Arbiter, Melos took his position at the center of the chamber, but his usually confident demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. The recordings from the previous day's hearing had spread across the galactic communication networks faster than any government could contain them. Billions of beings now knew that their peaceful council harbored members willing to commit secret genocide. Ambassador Kane stood once again on the central platform, but this time he was not alone. Research Director Valen remained beside him, despite assassination attempts from Helix operatives during the night. More surprising were the dozen other figures who had joined them, each representing different species, but all carrying similar evidence of secret weapon programs. "The Council recognizes the testimony phase," Melos announced, his voice lacking its previous authority. "Additional witnesses may present their evidence." The first to step forward was a crystalline being from the Silicon Reaches, its mineral body crackling with electrical discharges as it spoke. "I am Engineer Quarth of the Reach Defense Ministry. For 15 years, my government has been developing quantum weapons designed to disrupt organic neural networks. The target parameters were specifically calibrated for human brain chemistry." A wave of shock rippled through the chamber. The Silicon Reaches had been among humanity's strongest supporters for council membership, publicly advocating for their inclusion while secretly developing weapons to destroy them. The next witness was even more devastating. A representative from the Aquatic Collective, a species humanity had never even met before the trial, revealed underwater facilities where biological agents were being refined to target human respiratory systems. The evidence continued mounting after being stepped forward with proof of anti-human weapon development. Kane listened to each testimony with growing horror, not because he was surprised, but because the scope of the conspiracy exceeded even humanity's worst fears. It was not just the Helix Confederation that wanted humans eliminated. It was most of the galaxy's major powers all working independently toward the same goal. "Your Honor," Kane finally spoke when the witnesses had finished, "what we have learned here suggests that humanity's request for council membership was never seriously considered. It was a delay tactic, designed to keep us occupied while multiple species developed the means to eliminate us entirely." Supreme Arbiter Melos shifted uncomfortably on his throne. In 50,000 years of leadership, he had never faced a crisis that threatened to tear apart the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. The Council's authority rested on the principle that member species resolved conflicts through law and diplomacy, not secret weapon development and planned genocide. "The evidence presented is extensive," Melos admitted reluctantly. "However, the Council must consider the implications of ruling in humanity's favor. If preemptive self-defense becomes an accepted principle, it could justify any aggressive action taken by any species." Kane nodded gravely. "Your Honor, we understand the Council's concern. However, we would like to present additional evidence that may help clarify the situation." He activated his holographic projector again, but this time the display showed something that made every representative in the chamber recoil in shock. The image was a tactical map of the galaxy, but it was not showing current political boundaries. Instead, it displayed the locations of over 300 civilizations that had applied for council membership in the past 1,000 years. Every single one of them was marked as extinct. Research Director Valen's investigation into the Helix weapon program uncovered something far more disturbing than a single genocide plot, Kane explained. For over a millennium, the Council has been systematically eliminating species that seek membership. The pattern is always the same. The application process delays the species long enough for member civilizations to develop appropriate weapons. Then when the species becomes inconvenient, they simply disappear. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Representatives stared at the display showing the graves of 300 civilizations, each one a testament to the Council's hidden genocide policy. Kane continued speaking, his voice carrying across the vast space with terrible clarity. "Humanity is not the first species to discover this pattern. We are simply the first to survive long enough to present evidence. The question before this Council is not whether we have the right to defend ourselves. The question is whether the Council will continue its policy of systematic extermination, or whether it will finally live up to its stated principles of law and diplomacy." Research Director Valen stepped forward, its bioluminescent patches pulsing with patterns that conveyed deep shame. "When I began working on the Human Elimination Project, I believed I was serving the greater good. I was told that humans were naturally aggressive and would destabilize galactic peace. Only when I accessed the historical databases did I learn that every developing species is described in exactly the same terms. The implications hit the assembly like a physical force. Every member species in the chamber had once been described as naturally aggressive and dangerous to galactic peace. Every one of them had survived the application process only because they had been useful to existing powers, or had hidden their true capabilities until acceptance. Supreme Arbiter Melos stood slowly, his ancient frame seeming to bear the weight of 50,000 years of hidden crimes. If what you claim is true, then this council is not a peacekeeping organization. It is a systematic extermination program disguised as a government. Kane met the Supreme Arbiter's gaze directly. Your Honor, that is exactly what it is. The real question is what you intend to do about it. Around the chamber, representatives began leaving their seats. Some fled toward the exits, unwilling to face the collapse of everything they had believed about galactic civilization. Others moved toward the center of the chamber, drawn by the possibility of finally addressing the corruption that had festered at the heart of their government for millennia. But the most significant movement came from an unexpected source. The Helix Confederation delegation, instead of defending their government's actions, began presenting additional evidence of other elimination programs. Their government had kept detailed records of every species they had helped destroy, apparently as insurance against potential betrayal by other council members. We have documentation of elimination, programs targeting 417 species over the past 2,000 years, announced the Helix delegation leader, its tentacles shaking with what appeared to be genuine remorse. The council chambers we sit in today are built on the graves of civilizations that sought nothing more than peaceful membership in galactic society. The revelation broke the last vestiges of order in the chamber. Representatives began shouting accusations at each other in dozens of languages. Ancient alliances crumbled as species realized that their trusted partners had been systematically murdering potential rivals for millennia. Kane stood at the center of the chaos, watching the Galactic Council tear itself apart around him. This was not the outcome humanity had planned when they first applied for membership 3 years ago. They had simply wanted recognition as a civilized species worthy of participating in galactic affairs. Instead, they had accidentally exposed the greatest crime in galactic history. Supreme Arbiter Melos raised his hand for silence, and gradually the chamber quieted. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a civilization facing its own judgment. The evidence presented here cannot be ignored or dismissed. If the Council is to continue existing, it must be rebuilt from its foundations. The systematic elimination of developing species ends today. He turned to address Kane directly. Ambassador, humanity's application for membership is approved unanimously. Furthermore, this council formally requests that your species assist in investigating and prosecuting the crimes that have been committed in the name of galactic peace. Kane felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Humanity had sought membership in galactic civilization, only to discover that the civilization they wanted to join was built on the bones of species just like them. Your Honor, Kane replied, humanity accepts membership in the Council, but only on the condition that our first official act is the complete restructuring of galactic government. The current system has proven itself incapable of serving justice. As the session ended and the chamber began to empty, Kane realized that humanity had not joined galactic civilization. They had inherited the responsibility of rebuilding it entirely. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after the council hearings, Ambassador Kane stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, humanity's first official diplomatic facility in galactic space. The station orbited the neutral zone between 3 major galactic powers, its position carefully chosen to demonstrate humanity's new role as mediator in the rebuilding process. Through the massive observation windows, he could see ships from dozens of species arriving for the Emergency Reconstruction Summit, but Kane's attention was focused on the holographic displays showing intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The revelations about the Council's systematic genocide program had triggered something far more dangerous than political upheaval. It had started a war. Ambassador, reported Intelligence Director Lisa Park, approaching with a grim expression. We've confirmed 17 separate conflicts that began in the past month alone. The Helix Confederation is fighting the Silicon Reaches over historical elimination programs. The Aquatic Collective has declared war on the Crystal Dominion for supplying biological weapons. The entire outer rim is in chaos. Kane studied the tactical displays showing battle zones scattered across known space. When humanity had exposed the Council's crimes, they had expected some political instability. They had not anticipated that the revelation would cause the complete collapse of galactic civilization. "What's the casualty estimate?" Kane asked quietly. Park consulted her datapad with a troubled expression. "Conservative estimates suggest over 2 billion deaths in the past 6 months. Every species that was targeted for elimination has declared war on every species that participated in targeting them. The violence is spreading faster than our diplomatic teams can contain it." The irony was not lost on Kane. Humanity had joined galactic civilization to bring peace and justice, only to watch that civilization tear itself apart in an orgy of retribution and revenge. The species they had tried to save from the Council's genocide programs were now committing genocide against each other. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer James Wright, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Chen is requesting immediate conference." The main display flickered to show President Chen in the Situation Room beneath Geneva, surrounded by maps showing the scope of the galactic conflict. Her expression was grim as she addressed Kane directly. "Ambassador, the situation is deteriorating faster than our projections indicated. We're receiving requests for military intervention from 47 different species, all claiming they're fighting defensive wars against historical oppressors. If we don't act soon, the galaxy is going to destroy itself." Kane felt the weight of an impossible decision settling on his shoulders. "Madam President, our military forces are designed for defense, not galactic peacekeeping. We have 12 ships capable of interstellar combat. Some of these conflicts involve fleets numbering in the thousands. I'm aware of our limitations, Ambassador. That's why I'm authorizing the activation of Project Lighthouse." The words hit Kane like a physical blow. Project Lighthouse was humanity's most classified program, developed in absolute secrecy during the 3 years they had spent applying for Council membership. It was their contingency plan for the possibility that galactic civilization might prove hostile to human interests. "Madam President," Kane said carefully, "Project Lighthouse was designed for defensive scenarios. Using it as a peacekeeping tool could be interpreted as an act of aggression by every remaining government in the galaxy." President Chen's expression remained firm. "Ambassador, we have a choice. We can watch galactic civilization destroy itself in wars of revenge, or we can impose peace through superior technology. Which option serves the greater good?" Before Kane could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. On the tactical displays, new contacts were appearing throughout the system. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in the galactic databases. "Ambassador," reported Wright, his voice tight with shock, "we have multiple unknown vessels entering the system. Their technology profiles don't match any known species." Kane studied the readings with growing alarm. The ships were clearly artificial, but their design principles seemed to operate on physics that current galactic science didn't understand. They were not just advanced. They were alien in ways that made even the most exotic Council species seem familiar. "Open communications," Kane ordered. "Let's find out who they are." The main display flickered, and suddenly the command center was looking at something that defied immediate description. The being on the screen appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between geometric patterns that hurt human eyes to observe directly. "Greetings, young species," the entity spoke, its words somehow translating directly into Kane's mind, without passing through any technological interface. "We are the Watchers, guardians of galactic development. We have observed your recent actions with great interest." Kane felt his throat go dry. In all their intelligence gathering about galactic civilization, humanity had never encountered any reference to beings called the Watchers. Yet here they were, appearing in human space with technology that made the Council's most advanced systems look like primitive tools. "We welcome contact with your species," Kane replied carefully. "However, your timing is concerning. The galaxy is currently experiencing significant political instability." The Watcher entity seemed to ripple with what might have been amusement. "Young Ambassador, the instability you observe is not accidental. It is the inevitable result of a civilization that has grown beyond its natural boundaries without achieving emotional maturity." More displays activated around the command center, showing the Watcher ships taking positions throughout the galaxy. They were not just in human space. They were everywhere, appearing simultaneously in every major star system and observing the conflicts with detached interest. The Galactic Council, the Watcher continued, was allowed to exist for 50,000 years as an experiment in forced peaceful coexistence. The experiment has failed. The genocide programs you discovered were not aberrations. They were the inevitable result of species being forced to cooperate without having evolved the wisdom to do so genuinely. Kane felt the implications of the statement settling over him like a shroud. You're saying the Council's crimes were expected? They were predicted with 97% accuracy. Young species, when forced to cooperate before they are ready, inevitably resort to secret elimination of potential rivals. The pattern has repeated itself in 43 previous galactic civilizations we have observed. The revelation hit Kane harder than anything he had learned during the Council hearings. The Watchers had been observing galactic development for eons, treating entire civilizations as experimental subjects. The billions of beings who had died in the Council's genocide programs had been acceptable losses in a long-term study of species development. What happens now? Kane asked, dreading the answer. The Watcher entity shifted its attention to displays showing the ongoing conflicts across the galaxy. Now comes the natural conclusion of the experiment. The current galactic civilization will destroy itself through wars of retribution and revenge. The surviving species will either achieve genuine wisdom or be replaced by species that can. President Chen's voice cut through the communications channel from Earth. And humanity's role in this process? The Watcher turned its impossible attention toward the Earth transmission. Humanity is the first species in this galactic cycle to expose the systematic genocide programs before falling victim to them. This achievement demonstrates a level of intelligence and moral development that we have not previously observed. Kane felt a chill of premonition. What does that mean for us? It means, young ambassador, that humanity has earned the right to choose the galaxy's future. You can allow the current civilization to destroy itself naturally, or you can impose peace through the superior technology we are prepared to provide. The offer hung in the space between stars like a sword over the galaxy's head. Humanity could accept power beyond imagination and become the guardians of galactic civilization, or they could step aside and watch billions of beings die in wars of revenge and hatred. Kane looked at the displays showing conflicts spreading across known space, then at the impossible ships of the Watchers waiting for humanity's decision. In trying to join galactic civilization, they had discovered its darkest secrets. In exposing those secrets, they had triggered its collapse. Now they had to decide whether to save it or let it die. How long do we have to decide? Kane asked. The Watcher entity rippled again. The conflicts will reach critical mass within 6 months. After that point, intervention will become impossible. The choice must be made soon. As the transmission ended and the Watcher ships faded back into whatever dimension they inhabited, Kane realized that humanity's greatest challenge was just beginning. They had sought membership in galactic civilization, only to discover they might have to become its replacement. The question was whether they were wise enough to handle that responsibility, or whether they would simply repeat the cycle of oppression and violence that had destroyed every previous galactic government. Either way, the galaxy's future now rested in human hands. The emergency session of the United Earth Assembly took place in the deepest bunker beneath Geneva, where the planet's most critical decisions had been made for over 2 centuries. President Chen stood before representatives from every nation on Earth, but the weight of the decision they faced extended far beyond their home world. In the 3 weeks since the Watchers had made their offer, the galactic conflicts had intensified beyond all projections. The latest intelligence reports confirm our worst fears, announced General Harrison, his weathered face grim as he addressed the assembly. The war between the Helix Confederation and the Silicon Reaches has expanded to include 14 other species. Biological weapons are being deployed on civilian populations. Entire star systems are being sterilized rather than conquered. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the scope of the destruction in horrifying detail. Worlds that had supported billions of beings were now lifeless rocks floating in space. The cycle of revenge that had begun with humanity's revelations about the Council's genocide programs had spiraled completely out of control. President Chen stepped forward to address the assembly. The Watchers have made their position clear. We can accept their technology and impose peace on the galaxy through superior force, or we can allow the current civilization to destroy itself naturally. There is no middle ground. Ambassador Kane, attending via secure transmission from New Geneva Station, spoke from the main display. Madam President, I've been monitoring the diplomatic channels. Every surviving government is requesting our intervention. They're not asking us to choose sides in their conflicts. They're begging us to stop the wars entirely. The irony was staggering. The same species that had developed secret weapons to eliminate humanity were now pleading with them to prevent their mutual destruction. The council chambers that had once echoed with plans for human extinction now hosted desperate negotiations between former allies who were tearing each other apart. The moral calculus is complex, observed Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Earth's chief philosopher and the Assembly's ethical advisor. If we intervene, we become the dominant power in the galaxy by default. Every species becomes subject to human authority. If we don't intervene, we become complicit in genocide on a scale that dwarfs anything the Council ever attempted. Representative Williams from the African Union raised the question that everyone was thinking. What guarantee do we have that accepting the Watcher's technology won't corrupt us the same way power corrupted the Council? How do we know we won't become the next systematic oppressor? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Every previous galactic civilization had begun with noble intentions and evolved into something monstrous. The Council itself had probably started as a genuine, peacekeeping organization before degenerating into a systematic extermination program. President Chen activated a secure channel to the Watcher ships that remained hidden throughout the galaxy. We request additional information about the nature of the technology you're offering. What exactly would accepting your assistance entail? The response came immediately, the Watcher entity's voice reaching every consciousness in the chamber simultaneously. The technology package includes faster-than-light travel systems that operate on dimensional principles, unknown to current galactic science. Weapons capable of disabling entire fleets without destroying them. Most importantly, cognitive enhancement systems that prevent the psychological corruption associated with absolute power. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward with intense interest. Cognitive enhancement systems? Young species inevitably become corrupted by power because their brains are not evolved to handle authority over multiple civilizations. The enhancement systems modify neural pathways to maintain empathy and moral reasoning, even when wielding galactic-level authority. Previous species have refused this modification, preferring to trust their natural moral instincts. All of them eventually failed. The implications hit the Assembly like a physical force. The Watchers were not just offering technology. They were offering to fundamentally change human nature to prevent the cycle of corruption that had destroyed every previous galactic government. Kane's voice came through the transmission with obvious concern. Are we talking about permanent alterations to the human species? The modifications are inheritable but reversible. If humanity proves capable of maintaining galactic peace for 10,000 years, the enhancements can be removed and natural human psychology restored. However, removal before that time would result in the same corruption patterns that destroyed previous civilizations. President Chen felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a physical force. They were being asked to choose not just the fate of galactic civilization, but the future evolution of humanity itself. Accept the modifications and become something more than human. Refuse them and watch the galaxy burn while remaining purely human observers. There's another factor to consider, interrupted Intelligence Director Park through a priority channel. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive energy signatures moving through intergalactic space. Something is approaching the galaxy from outside, and based on the trajectory calculations, it will arrive within 50 years. The Watcher entity responded before anyone could ask the obvious question. The approaching entities are devourers, young President. They consume not just matter and energy, but the quantum information that allows consciousness to exist. They have destroyed 43 previous galactic civilizations we have observed. The current conflicts in your galaxy are not just threatening internal stability, they are eliminating the unified resistance necessary to survive the coming invasion. The revelation changed everything. The choice was no longer between intervention and non-intervention. It was between accepting the modifications necessary to unite the galaxy against an external threat, or watching everything sentient in the Milky Way be erased from existence. Ambassador Kane appeared to realize the same thing. The timing isn't coincidental, is it? The Council's genocide programs, the exposure of their crimes, the current wars the Watchers offer, and the approaching Devourers. This has all been orchestrated. Young Ambassador, you demonstrate the intelligence that convinced us to select your species for this role. Yes, the sequence of events has been carefully managed. The Council was allowed to develop their genocide programs because their exposure would trigger the conflicts necessary to eliminate governments too corrupt to resist the Devourers. Effectively, President Chen felt a chill of understanding. You've been manipulating galactic development for millennia, creating crises designed to force evolutionary leaps. We have been guiding development towards species capable of defending against threats that exist beyond any single galaxy. The Devourers are not unique. They are part of a larger pattern of predatory entities that move between galaxies, consuming civilizations that are not sufficiently advanced to resist them. The Assembly fell into shocked silence as the true scope of their situation became clear. They were not just choosing the fate of their galaxy. They were choosing whether any galaxy would survive the threats that existed in the space between stars. Dr. Mitchell spoke into the silence with a voice that carried the weight of the entire human species. If we accept the modifications, what becomes of human culture, human art, human philosophy? Do we remain recognizably human? The modifications enhance cognitive capacity and prevent corruption, but they do not alter fundamental personality or cultural identity. Enhanced humans would still create art, literature, music, and philosophy. They would simply do so with the wisdom necessary to govern multiple civilizations without becoming monsters. President Chen looked around the chamber, at the faces of humanity's representatives, then at the displays showing the galaxy tearing itself apart in wars of revenge and hatred. The choice was impossible, but it was also inevitable. We need to vote, she announced. All in favor of accepting the Watchers' modifications and intervening in the galactic conflicts? The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity chose to become something more than human in order to save something larger than themselves. As the modifications began, and the first enhanced humans took control of Watcher technology, the galaxy's longest night began to end. But in accepting the power to save galactic civilization, humanity had also accepted responsibility for defending it against threats that existed beyond the edge of known space. The real test was yet to come. 2 years after the enhancement, Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, humanity's first Watcher technology starship, as it emerged from dimensional space above the war-torn Helix homeworld. The conflict that had begun with humanity's exposure of the Council's genocide programs was finally nearing its end, but not in any way the galaxy had expected. The enhanced cognitive systems in Kane's mind processed tactical information at superhuman speeds while maintaining perfect emotional balance. Around him, his crew worked with the same impossible efficiency, their enhanced minds coordinating fleet movements across 17 star systems simultaneously. The modifications the Watchers had provided did not make humans less human. They made them more capable of being human on a galactic scale. Admiral, reported Navigation Officer Torres, her enhanced consciousness interfacing directly with the ship's dimensional drive. We have visual confirmation of the Helix Silicon battle fleet. Estimated 12,000 ships engaged in combat operations around the fourth planet. Through the bridge's transparent aluminum windows, Kane could see the battle raging in the space around Helix Prime. 2 years of warfare had reduced both fleets to desperate remnants of their former strength, but they continued fighting with the fury of species that had nothing left to lose. Plasma cannon fire lit up the darkness between worlds, while biological weapons turned the vacuum of space into a toxic soup that would take centuries to clear. Open communications to both fleets, Kane ordered. This is Admiral Kane of the United Earth Fleet. You will cease fire immediately and prepare to receive boarding parties. The war ends today. The response came from Admiral Korath of the Silicon Reaches, his crystalline voice crackling with defiance through the quantum communicators. Human Admiral, your species has no authority in this conflict. The Silicon Reaches will not surrender to beings who are barely evolved beyond planetary civilization. Kane smiled, an expression that the enhanced humans had learned to use very carefully. It conveyed not arrogance but the absolute confidence of beings who understood their capabilities completely. Admiral Korath, your species has been fighting this war for 2 years with fleets numbering in the thousands. We are ending it today with 12 ships. The Prometheus moved forward, and as it did, space around it began to behave in ways that violated every principle of known physics. The ship's dimensional drives created gravitational anomalies that pulled enemy vessels out of combat formation, while its quantum disruptors disabled weapon systems without damaging life support. In minutes, both fleets found themselves helpless and drifting. But Kane's demonstration was just beginning. The other 11 ships in the human fleet spread throughout the system, and each one began broadcasting the same impossible signal. Every computer, every communication system, every electronic device in the Helix system suddenly displayed the same message. A complete record of every atrocity committed by both sides during the war. The Helix commanders watched in horror as detailed footage of their biological weapons killing Silicon civilians played on their own bridge displays. The Silicon officers saw recordings of their gravitational weapons tearing apart Helix nursery worlds. Both sides witnessed the complete documentation of war crimes that would have remained hidden forever under normal circumstances. "This is how the war ends," Kane announced over all frequencies, "not with victory or defeat, but with truth. Every species in this galaxy will see exactly what you have done to each other. Every civilian death, every atrocity, every moment of hatred that has driven this conflict will be preserved in galactic memory forever." Admiral Korath's voice came through the communication system with a note of desperate pleading. "Human Admiral, these recordings will destroy our civilizations. Our own people will never forgive us for what we have done. Admiral, your civilizations destroyed themselves the moment they chose revenge over justice. We are simply ensuring that the galaxy learns from your example." The enhanced human crews aboard the 12 ships worked with perfect coordination, using Watcher technology to disable every military vessel in the system without harming a single crew member. But their real target was not the ships themselves. It was the hatred that had driven the conflict from the beginning. Kane activated the ship's most advanced system, the empathy projector, that the Watchers had provided for exactly this purpose. The device created a quantum field that temporarily linked the consciousness of every being in the system, allowing them to experience the conflict from their enemy's perspective. Helix commanders suddenly felt the terror of Silicon children as biological weapons dissolved their crystalline bodies. Silicon officers experienced the agony of Helix civilians as gravitational weapons tore their organic forms apart. For the first time in 2 years of warfare, both sides truly understood the cost of their hatred. The effect was immediate and profound. Across both fleets, weapon systems were powered down not by external command, but by the crew members who could no longer bring themselves to continue fighting. The war did not end with surrender or victory. It ended with a collective realization of the horror that revenge had created. "This is the lesson the galaxy must learn," Kane announced as the quantum field dissipated. "Hatred creates only more hatred. Revenge generates only more revenge. The cycle continues until nothing remains but death and destruction." On the bridge of the Prometheus, Communications Officer Wright reported the wider scope of their operation. "Admiral, similar interventions are concluding in all 17 conflict zones. Total casualties from our operations, 0. Total military assets disabled, 47,000 ships. Estimated time to complete galactic pacification, 72 hours. Kane nodded, but his enhanced mind was already focused on the larger challenge ahead. The Devourers were still approaching through intergalactic space, their arrival now less than 48 years away. The unified resistance necessary to survive their attack could not be built on the ruins of civilizations that had destroyed themselves through warfare. "Admiral," came a transmission from Earth. "President Chen is requesting a status report on the reconstruction protocol." Kane activated his direct link to the galactic communication network that human-enhanced systems now controlled. "Madam President, military operations are concluding ahead of schedule. We are ready to begin Phase 2. Phase 2 was humanity's most ambitious project, the complete rebuilding of galactic civilization along principles that would prevent the cycle of corruption and violence that had destroyed every previous attempt at interstellar government. Using Watcher technology, they would create a galactic democracy where every species had genuine representation and no single power could develop genocide, weapons in secret. The enhanced council chambers are ready for occupation, reported Chief Engineer Park from the construction sites scattered throughout the galaxy. The new government structure includes cognitive enhancement requirements for all leadership, positions and real-time transparency, protocols that make secret weapon development impossible. Kane felt the weight of the future settling on his shoulders. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior force. They had inherited responsibility for it by being the only species willing to accept the modifications necessary to govern without corruption. All ships, he commanded, return to base. The war is over. The real work begins now. As the human fleet departed the Helix system, they left behind something unprecedented in galactic history. Former enemies working together to rebuild what their hatred had destroyed. The empathy projectors had shown both sides that their enemies were not monsters, but frightened beings trying to protect their own people in the only way they knew how. Back on Earth, President Chen stood in the new Galactic Command Center, watching displays that showed peaceful cooperation beginning to emerge throughout known space. The modifications had worked. Humanity retained its essential nature while gaining the wisdom necessary to govern multiple civilizations without becoming oppressive. But in the deepest levels of the command center, long-range sensors continued tracking the approaching devourers. The real test of their enhanced civilization was still decades away, when they would face entities that had destroyed every previous galactic civilization the Watchers had observed. Kane's voice came through the communication system from space, carrying the quiet confidence of an enhanced human who understood both the magnitude of their achievement and the challenges yet to come. Madam President, the galaxy is united. We have 48 years to prepare for the real war. I suggest we use them wisely. As the transmission ended, both leaders turned their attention to the long-term survival protocols that would determine whether their enhanced civilization could break the cycle of destruction that had claimed 43 previous galaxies. For the first time in galactic history, they had a chance to find out. The galaxy that had declared war on humanity was gone, replaced by something that had never existed before, a civilization capable of learning from its mistakes. Whether that would be enough to survive what was coming remained to be seen. But for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy had hope.